digging up dahlia tubers, and we're going to walk you guys through this process on this episode and show you how we do it, how we store them, all that kind of stuff. So dahlias are grown via a tuber, and you put the tuber in the ground, and after about 3 months it shoots up a beautiful flower. And to be able to dig that tuber up, the tuber needs to have been in the ground for 120 days. So we put our tubers in the ground in May. It is now early, almost middle of October, and we have not had our first frost yet. In fact, it is 81 degrees today, but we are going to start digging up our dahlia tubers because we have a lot to process. We are not really getting a crop off of these anymore, and we need to make room for our dahlia, or our tulips, and our ranunculus as well. The first reason that we're digging up our dahlias this year is because we just moved here and I don't know if this field floods or where the water table, kind of what it does in the winter time. And there have been parts of this field that does take on a lot of water. So one of the big reasons we're digging up this year is because we don't want to lose any of our tubers to the field flooding, or a really, really wet winter if that happens. So that's our first big reason why we're digging up. The second reason we're digging up is we are trying to multiply our stock. So to multiply your stock of dahlia tubers, you dig up the tubers and then you divide those tubers, because every growing season, a dahlia tuber or a dahlia plant multiplies. And you can start with one tuber, and at the end of the season, you'll have anywhere from 3 or 4 to 8, 9, or 10 sometimes more tubers than what you started out with. But we're also digging up because we are building our stock. And lastly, the last reason also is we just don't want to take the chance of losing anything. Mother Nature, you can only predict really not so much with Mother Nature. Dahlias, they can withstand cold temperatures, but they don't love being wet and freezing. We are digging them up this year while we're here at this new property because we just don't know what this property does. So I'm going to show you guys the process in which we use to dig them up, and also how we store them. The way that we dig up our dahlia tubers is we use a pitchfork. And the reason we use a pitchfork is because a pitchfork can lift up dirt in a manner that is less obtrusive than a shovel. I don't know how else to really explain that other than you can use a pitchfork or a shovel. The risk you run with a shovel is when you cut into the ground, you could cut or lose dahlia tubers. Whereas a pitchfork, you can just puncture a tuber, but that they can still survive from that. With a pitchfork, we find that we can just lift up a little bit better, and it gives a little bit more if tubers are kind of in the ground pretty good, which growing in clay, our tubers are really stuck in the ground, and we have to be really delicate when we dig them out. We have a bunch of plastic bins that we've collected over the last year, but we previously have stored our tubers in cardboard boxes, and we have a labeling system. So the labeling system we use are these plastic Maycor tags. Maycor, I believe, is the company that makes these. I'll share it in our information below, but we get these 12-inch by 1-inch tags, and we write the name down. That's how we identify them throughout the season. So we have a Maycor tag, and then we also have a blue piece of tape with a rubber band on it that we then put around the tuber once it's dug up. And it's just kind of a double insurance way of making sure that we keep everything labeled and organized. So I've started by digging up some of our new varieties that were expensive and that we definitely don't want to lose, and that we want to process and be really kind of safe and delicate with. So I've started processing our kind of more expensive dahlia tubers first, and I'm just kind of going one row at a time where I will take the plastic bin and I will take the Maycore tag that I'm digging up the tuber of. I put it in the plastic bin. I then dig up the dahlia tuber and I put that rubber band with the blue tape label on it. I put that around the tuber and then I stick that in the bin. This can take days, if not weeks, depending on the size of your dahlia crop. I think this is gonna take us just a couple of weeks because of our schedule and because of, you know, all the other projects we have going on. But I started this now because in years past, I have done this when it is raining, when it is cold, when it sucks. And I didn't want to do that this year. At least I didn't want to do a majority of it. So right now we don't have any rain in the forecast for a while, which it is October right now. We've had no rain, which isn't great, but at least it makes it nice to do this. We have no rain in the schedule, so I've started the digging process. And I'm also kind of, you know, weeding out any varieties that maybe just I don't want to grow. There are only a couple that I'm going to be getting rid of. But for the most part, we are saving everything so we can multiply our stock, and then next year we can grow, you know, double, triple what we grew this year. Once I am done digging up a good batch of dahlia tubers, I then take them to our pole barn. So in our pole barn, we've shown you guys the kind of storage room or office room that we have in there, which is a multi-purpose room for us. We are putting all of our dahlia tubers on the racks in there so they can dry out and cure for at least a couple days, if not maybe a couple weeks. I might leave them in there depending on how things look. But we're going to test that out. We're going to dry them in our office in there. And then we're going to be putting all of our tubers and storing them in these plastic bins. They're going to have lids on them. The lids have holes though, so there is able to be some air circulation. And then we're using wood chips. I've used wood chips previously and it does tend to run a little bit dry, but because we've stored our tubers previously in kind of a moist environment, it worked fine. But this year I think it might be a little bit too dry, so we're just going to be checking our tubers like every couple weeks to make sure that they're not drying out or they're not rotting. Okay guys, so we are now to the storage portion of this video, and I want to show you the method that we use for storage, but also talk about the why. We use these plastic bins that we got from Costco, and you can kind of see we drilled holes right down the center of the lid, and then we also drilled holes in the sides. We opted, after growing dahlias for 3 or 4 years, we opted to start using these plastic bins because I loved using cardboard, but it was difficult getting in and out of the boxes and actually being able to see how the tubers were doing. So we like to check our dahlias every couple of weeks or at least once a month at a minimum to make sure that they're not rotting, to make sure that they're, you know, healthy. And cardboard boxes, they worked great, but I love being able to see into the box. And also, the cardboard would only hold up for one season, and I wanted to, yeah, it was just personal preference in that I loved the storage of these as well and being able to stack these. So we use plastic bins with holes drilled in them. And then for the medium that we store our tubers in, we use wood shavings. Now, when it comes to looking up or researching how to store dahlia tubers, there are many ways you can store dahlia tubers, and they are all correct in that it depends on your environment, where you're going to be storing your tubers as to how you store them, and I'll elaborate. We use wood shavings to store our dahlia tubers in, and one of the reasons is because it's inexpensive, and the other is because we have a kind of humid storage space that they sit in, and in maybe another environment, wood shavings might be too dry for the tubers, but it's worked for us. However, We've never stored tubers here at this new property, and so this season we're once again kind of trialing to see if wood shavings are the best medium to store in. I know folks that store their tubers in vermiculite, great option. I know folks that saran wrap and then store all their tubers in wood shavings and a little bit of dirt, I think too. There are a lot of different methods. I don't think there is any one that is holier than thou. It is all dependent on your environment. So you definitely need to experiment a little bit. And if something isn't working, tweak it. So to store our tubers, I just take my box and I'm going to put one kind of basic small layer of shavings in the bottom, just so they have something to sit on. And I do want to preface, we have gone through and we have cleaned up a lot of our tubers already. So by cleaning up, I mean, as you can see here, I'm going to cut all these kind of little things off. I've dusted off some of the mud, but they're fine to go in the box dirty. They don't have to be clean at all. However, you do want to make sure that they aren't wet. So our tubers here have been drying out for at least a week now. So once I've cleaned this up a bit, I'm going to cut these stalks down a little bit too. I start layering these. So I start putting them in the box here, and I am intentionally leaving a little bit of room between all of them. And then I'm going to add another layer of chips. And then I take the next. I do want to show you too. I do have the label here. I've just set it off to the side, but I have my label off to the side. So I've filled this up with about three layers of dahlia tubers. None of them are touching each other, but they have lots of wood chips packed in here. I'm going to go ahead and set this on the shelf. Now I do want to show you, this is one box where I have multiple varieties in it because I only have 1 or 2 tubers. So I put all of the sticks on top, and then each tuber has the blue identification tape wrapped around it. And one winter project that we do is we will go around and make a list of what is in each box, and then we'll stick it on the outside so I can just look on the outside of the box what is stored in here. So when it comes time for spring, I can look at the box and I can start organizing how I want to set up the field. I do want to briefly mention, we do not, or at least this year, we are not dividing our tubers in the fall. We are going to be waiting to divide our tubers until the spring, and there are a couple of reasons. The biggest reason that we are waiting until spring to divide up our tubers is so we can see the eyes. So on our, on these dahlia tubers, you can divide up this clump right here, probably into 4 separate clumps, which will give you, 4 separate dahlia plants. However, to have a viable tuber, they have to have what's called an eye. And right now, I can't easily see where the eyes are because these have now gone dormant and are ready to be stored, for the winter. But in the springtime, after the dahlias have been, sitting and stored away, they start to wake up a little bit, and you can see their eyes, at least for me, I can see their eyes a lot better come spring. And then we divide them. When it comes time to start dividing our tubers, we may divide some in the middle of winter just to kind of see what our stock is. But for now, we're waiting until spring to do that, and we will absolutely have a video, or we will post a video for that. But for now, we are just storing everything as is, and we'll be dividing in the spring. we are pivoting, which is our favorite word, pivoting. Helpful with a little bit of context of, or starting off, plastic bins or box or